These are the contents that we will be discussing today. First, introduction to PCA. What is PCA or Principal Component Analysis? PCA is a dimension reduction technique. It is used to reduce the complexity in the data. Thus, the obtained dataset is computationally less intensive and easier to visualize. This dataset was taken from Kaggle. It has 6 features and one target variable. After pre-processing of data, PCA was performed on the original dataset and we get the second dataset. The second dataset explains around 75% of the variance that was present in the original dataset. As we can see, at the second dataset we only have 2 features and still we are able to explain 75% of the variance. This is the power of PCA. The new dataset was plotted. In the plot, we can clearly see clusters forming with some expected outliers. Let us now use PCA for portfolio optimization. The data used for analysis was Dow Jones 2010 to 2019 data. We can see that PC1 explains around 37% of the variance in the data. PC1 explains the movement of the market as a whole rather than the movement that is caused due to individual stock or sectors. The other PCs explains the movement in the Dow Jones index that are sector specific. Over here, we analyze the contribution of stocks to the PCs. Since PC1 explains the market as a whole, all stocks in PC have relatively equal and positive contribution. Coming to stocks of PC2, we observe that companies like Coca-Cola, J&J, that is Johnson & Johnson, and Procter & Gamble have high positive contribution. These companies all belong to the consumer discretionary sector, while companies like Apple, Cisco, and Microsoft have high negative contribution, and all these companies belong to the IT sector. Finally, we plotted the performance of some of the portfolio against an equally weighted portfolio. We observe that PC1 performs very similar to the equally weighted portfolio. This is due to the fact that PC1 itself very closely resembles the equally weighted portfolio as we discussed earlier. PC2 performed very poorly. PC5 gives us some interesting results since it has a very high annual return of 188 and a very high volatility as well of 93, effectively giving us the risk adjusted return of 2.03. A risk averse investor wouldn't want to invest in such a portfolio since it brings lots of volatility with it, while a aggressive investor would love investing such a portfolio since the annual return is far superior as compared to any other portfolios. Now let's look at another portfolio optimization technique, the hierarchical risk parity HRP portfolio optimization. What is HRP? It is a portfolio optimization technique that focuses on risk management rather than return maximization. Assets with similar risk profile are clustered together. Weights are assigned such that each clusters have equal risk. Clusters with high risk are given less weight and lower risk are given higher weights. This is a dendrogram of the clusters. Over here, we can see CRH and Ferguson are clustered together. CRH and Ferguson are clustered together. Both these companies are in construction. CRH manufactures cement while Ferguson is in piping and heating solution. Since the companies operate in the same sector, the risk profile will be similar and hence are clustered together. Similarly, other clusters are formed. In this graph, the bar graph represents the weights allocated to each stock and the line represents the standard deviation of that stock. As we see, higher weightage is given to stocks with lower standard deviation. There are some unusual dip in the standard deviation line. This is due to the fact that HRP allocates weights to the clusters rather than individual stocks. But we can clearly see an uptrend in the standard deviation line. Let us now compare the performance of HRP portfolio against an equally weighted portfolio. The left graph is for the in sample and the right graph is for out of sample. For in sample, we can see HRP performance is low or HRP portfolio underperformed, but the variation is also much less than the equally weighted portfolio. This is also evident from the table. For the out of sample, we see HRP slightly overperformed with the same standard deviation. Hence, the risk return ratio is better for the out of sample. From this, we can comment that HRP performs well in sideways market and will remain robust in downtrending market. But in uptrending market, HRP might underperform since low weightage is given to stocks with higher standard deviation, and mostly they are the growth stock which grows the fastest in an uptrending market. Let us now see the shortcomings of using machine learning in portfolio optimization. Number one, inferior results of HRP portfolio. As we discussed earlier, the performance of HRP is inferior to an equally weighted portfolio in uptrending market where most of the profits are generated. One solution can be using a hybrid approach such that we make another portfolio which complements the HRP portfolio. Second, transaction cost. Most machine learning models do not consider transaction costs. Transaction costs can significantly affect the performance of the portfolio and hence is very important to be considered during the modeling of the machine learning model. One solution is that we can use the transaction cost analysis. TCA estimates the transaction cost using historical data. Third, liquidity availability. Most machine learning models assume that the orders are filled at the price that they are placing the orders. They do not consider the impact cost of their orders and assume that liquidity is always available. The impact cost can be really high in low liquidity markets. To model this, we can use the liquidity risk models in the original machine learning model. Thank you for listening to me.